If you had asked me if you could never have sex with her, you only could be her friend. So you were basing this completely on the conversation you have, the connection you feel, the fun you have when you're together, the type of person they are, their personality, their jokes, their humor, all of that. If you could never have sex with this person and you had to solely maintain a continuous relationship with them based on how much you like them as a human being, the reality is I probably would not have chosen to have a relationship with any of the long-term relationships I was in prior to my wife. Welcome to the Conscious Love Show. My name is Shane Kohler. I've spent over a decade helping women understand the unconscious patterns driving their relationships and what it actually takes to change them. I'm one of the most direct voices in the modern relationship space and the person who will tell you the truth that most coaches are afraid to name. This show is for anyone who's done settling, done shrinking, and done wondering why love keeps falling short. I'm not here to make you feel better about patterns that aren't serving you. I'm here to name them, help you understand them, and learn how to change them. If you're ready for that, I'm glad you're here, and let's get into it. So I recently had a pretty profound conversation with my wife that got me thinking on some things I wanted to speak about in today's episode. And what she said was that when she looks back on her relationships of the past and the times that she was in love or the times that she thought she was in love prior to our marriage, and when she compares those experiences to what we have in our marriage today, they feel insignificant by comparison. And essentially what she was saying was that what I understood love to be back then is nothing next to what I understand love to be now. But back then, I didn't even have the frame of reference to be able to see that. That was all I knew. That was all I had experienced. And I thought this infatuation or this rumination about somebody, that's what love was. But now that, we've been in our relationship for 10 years, and she was saying that love is what endures. Love is what stands by your side through all these ups and downs. And it's what stays consistent through every trial and every challenge of life. And back then, what she was experiencing wasn't love at all, but she just couldn't understand it from that vantage point. And it got me thinking about when I was in high school, we learned about the various forms of love according to Greek philosophy. And some of you may have learned this as well in your English class, but I remember very distinctly this lesson, and it always stuck with me that there were these various types of love, that love wasn't just this one thing. And so I've been thinking about this, and I did a little research, and I read up on all the various types of love according to Greek philosophy. And some of you may be familiar with the terms. There's eros, and there's philia, and there's agape. And these are these different forms of love that I'm going to explore a little bit today. But as I was reading about these, there's one in particular that really stood out to me, and it's called pragma. And pragma is what I think the ultimate goal of our romantic relationships are. And that's exactly what my wife was naming when she said love is what endures, or love is what stays by your side and stays consistent through all the ups and downs and the trials of life. And pragma is essentially like a mature dedication, commitment, and devotion to someone that supersedes our kind of surface level egoic needs. So it's a level of deep acceptance, right? Where I accept you for who you are. You accept me for who I am. I'm not trying to make you become anything. You're not trying to make me become anything. We're not living through these fantasies and projections of each other and trying to validate ourselves through each other or trying to prove something to each other. It's just this deep contentment in the relationship, mutual understanding, a shared life, an acceptance, an allowance for both people to be who they are, a love for each person as they are, right? It's like a very mature, developed form of love. And I was like, well, when we talk about romantic partnership, this is the ultimate goal. Like, this is where we all ultimately want to end up. But relationships can never start there. And so this is what my wife was naming, is like, when I look back to the relationships I had earlier in life, and most of these relationships are either eros or philia, and we'll talk a little bit about what that means today. But when we look back on our younger relationships, they might have had elements of what my wife and I have today. But they literally can't be this because they haven't had the time and the space to mature into this. And so as I've been putting together today's episode, what I've been looking at is how relationships have to start as one thing and evolve into something else. And it got me thinking about, as men, where do we need to start in a relationship in order to ultimately end up in pragma with a woman? That mature, devoted love that stays by your side through the years, stands the test of time, is consistent through challenges. Like, where does a man need to enter a relationship from to ultimately find himself in that place with a woman down the road? And so that's what I'm going to be exploring in today's episode. Now, before we get too far into it, there are a couple of things I want to name here. And the first one is I want to name the various types of love according to the Greek philosophy and define each of them, because that's going to give a lot of context to today's conversation. There are actually 5 different types of love that I'm going to name in today's episode, and 4 of them come directly from the Greek philosophy. So that would be eros, philia, agape, and pragma, like we touched on earlier. The 5th one is one that the Greeks actually didn't have a word for, and it's the one that is the answer to the question I posed earlier about where is it that a man needs to start in order to ultimately end up in pragma with a woman down the road. The Greeks didn't have a word for that, so I made one up, and as we go through today's episode, I'm going to refer to that type as anchored love. And I'll circle back to that a little bit later on. So if we look at these first 4 types of love, eros, philia, agape, and pragma, the first one I want to speak about is agape. Because if we were to take love as a single thing, agape would be that thing. So you can think of agape as total love, unconditional love, God love. It's like the way that God looks at his or her creations. Right? It is the unconditional love for existence itself. When you're in a really connected place and you look out at the world and you say, I love everyone and everything, there is nothing that is abhorrent, nothing that is outside of God, because it all is lovable. It all is part of creation, right? That's agape. It is total love. It transcends condition. It transcends expectation. It transcends need and wanting. It transcends preference. It is the recognition that everything is equally worthy and equally lovable without condition. That's agape. Now, what's really interesting about agape is that it is the ultimate form of love, and yet it has almost nothing to do with romantic partnership. And that's an important theme to name in today's episode, because going back to what my wife was saying earlier is like, agape is the ultimate form of love, and it's not what most people are falling into when they say they're falling in love. So if agape is the ultimate form of love, everything else must be a derivative of agape. Everything else must be a part of agape that's distorted a little bit by ego, by need, by expectation, by condition. And that's an important theme, but we'll come back to that later as well. So agape is God love, ultimate, unconditional, everything is equally worthy, everything is equally lovable kind of love. The next one I want to name is eros. Eros is attraction, passion, sexual love. So eros is that hot chemistry, that heat you feel with someone, that deep desire to get your hands all over their body, to get their hands all over your body, right? That's eros. It is that physical drive for sex and passion and romance. It is romantic love, essentially, and everything that comes with romantic love. That's eros. Philia is brotherly love or friendship. So when someone ends up in the friend zone, you really, really love that person. You think they're wonderful. They're your best friend. They're your favorite person, but you don't want to get naked with them. You don't want them to touch you. You don't want to touch them. You don't want to kiss them. They're a really nice person and you adore them. You feel safe with them. You trust them, but you want them to stay on the other side of the couch. That's philia. Now, the fourth type of love is pragma. And that's what I said earlier is the ultimate destination for a romantic relationship. Pragma is the closest that a human relationship can get to agape. So it's not perfect, unconditional God love. It has conditions, but it has less conditions, right? Like if my wife or I cheated on each other, that would be a condition. If one of us hit each other, that would be a condition. We have conditions, but we have less conditions. Pragma is what happens when the endurance of the relationship has killed off the egoic aspects of romantic love. So the expectation, the fantasy, the obsessiveness, the clinging. It's when what remains is a sense of real acceptance, peace, safety, and belonging. It's when the drama has died down and what you experience in relationship with each other is the security of what survived reality. And this is what my wife was describing earlier, the feeling not of falling in love, but what's left when the intensity has passed through and reality has endured. Right? In the beginning, there's a really intense sense of chemistry and sense of activation, but the love that's there is distorted by a lot of other things. It's distorted by my need. It's distorted by my wanting. It's distorted by my performance. It's distorted by my desire for a specific outcome and my need to control what happens or where it goes and my need to have the relationship validate me, like having my worth tied to it. If they choose me, I'm good enough. If they don't choose with me, I'm not. Like these are distortions of love. These are not expressions of love. And that's why early love, especially love that is based in eros, it has a particularly toxic element to it because there's so much about it that is not clean. There's so many conditions. There's so many expectations. There's so much need that our ego has tied itself into the relationship, and there's so much performance that's happening, and it's all of that is a limitation on the love that can be experienced. And pragma is where a relationship ends up when all of that has been ironed out. You feel safe with each other. You feel like you belong with each other. You're not trying to prove yourself to each other. You're not trying to get chosen by the other person. You trust the relationship. You trust that that person is there. There's a secure, safe love. You've seen all of them. They've seen all of you. You're not hiding anything from each other. You're not ashamed of anything in the relationship. There's a deep acceptance. It's like you see me and you love me for who I am, and I see you and I love you for who you are. That's pragma. And that's really what we all want in love at the end of the day. That's what everybody is desiring on the deepest level. That safe place to come home to. That place where you know you belong. That person who sees you and loves you for who you are. So how do we get there? That's the question I'm answering in today's episode. Because you can't start with pragma. Nobody starts there. Love has to begin somewhere else and evolve into that over time. We obviously don't start with agape. So do we start with eros Or do we start with Phila? And the reality is that neither of these are a sufficient foundation for something long-term to develop. And I'm sure you know this because you've tried both of them. How many of us have tried the hot and fast thing that burned out just as fast as it started? That's what Eros does. And actually, science on hormones and the brain confirm this, is that Eros burns hot and it burns out quickly. There's a peak and a drop. There's a flood of certain hormones like serotonin and dopamine and these various sexual hormones that get us moving towards each other in relationship. And then there's a point where those hormones drop off. But you've probably also tried starting with Phila. You find that person who's your best friend and you're like, oh my God, on paper, they're perfect in every way. If only I could get turned on by them, it would be great. And unfortunately, the mind and the body doesn't necessarily work like that. Eros is activated by the things that activate Eros, and Phila is activated by the things that activate Phila, and those things don't necessarily coincide with each other. In fact, we often find them in completely different people. And so as I was sitting down and putting this together, what I realized is that you really need both to be present. You need Eros and Phila. And if you have that with someone, that's a suitable foundation that can evolve into pragma over time. And that's what I'm calling anchored love. Anchored love is a connection that has the hot, romantic passion, but also the deep bond of trust and security and safety, like this person could be your best friend. And I know a lot of you are probably going, well, duh, that's what I've been looking for, but I just can't find it. And here's the reality, is you're probably not going to find it. Because that's not found. That's created. There's an intentional process of creating that with someone. And if you don't create that, if you're just hoping to stumble into it, you're going to stumble into the pitfalls of either Eros or Phila. And you're not going to have that connection. So what does it mean to actually create anchored love with someone? And the reality is you have to start with either Eros or Phila. Most people start with Eros because it's easy and it's obvious. And I'm not saying it's wrong. My relationship with my wife started that way. It's easy, it's obvious, it doesn't take any work. But it's also the most dangerous path because of how hot and fast it is. And this is why so many people experience crash and burn relationships. It's because there was Eros driving the relationship. There was nothing to balance it out. It got hot fast and it burned out quickly. In fact, I remember my wife, I'll never forget these words. She said this to me many times early on because, maybe it's because she was a woman. She'd been burned by men a few times. Maybe it's because she's a little bit older than me and had a little more heartbreak under her belt. I don't know exactly why. But she said to me on several occasions that I want a slow burn. And she intentionally paced the relationship so that something other than Eros had space to develop. And me, I didn't have that awareness yet. I was a little bit younger. I was still exploring and having fun. And I was just, full speed ahead, whatever feels good. And that was the thing that sabotaged most of my relationship, because this is what happens with Eros-based relationships, which, by the way, when I look at my history everything that happened prior to my wife. And by the way, I share the same sentiment that she shared earlier. When I look at all of those connections, and I had quite a few very significant relationships. I mean, relationships that lasted a year or more, people that I would have said I was in love with. We said I love you to each other every day. We were partners in each other's lives in a lot of ways. Like, I had very significant, relatively long-term relationships, and I would have said I was in love or I loved these people. But they weren't what I know love to be now. And I see and understand completely what my wife was saying. And the reality is I had a lot of eros-based relationships and a lot of philia-based relationships. And whenever I had philia-based relationships, in reality, a lot of times I had some eros going on, but they didn't, and I was in the friend zone. That happened quite a few times. Or there are some women that I have philia-based relationships with, and there was just never anything more there. I never, even if I could objectively look at them and say, yeah, she's an attractive woman, there was never that drive or desire toward her in that way. I never felt that romantic way about her. And I had a lot of eros-based relationships, but this is what happens with eros relationships. If you allow that to dominate the connection too quickly, that will become what the relationship is about. And it will put a certain barrier where it never becomes about anything else. And I look back on every long-term romantic connection I had prior to my wife, and it followed the same trend. We started sleeping together right away. Because we were sleeping together, we wanted to sleep together more. We started spending more time together. We started seeing each other almost every day. The consistency of that progressed into, hey, we're seeing each other every day. We're hanging out all the time. We're having sex regularly. We should probably be boyfriend and girlfriend. That moved into us making plans together and so on. But it's kind of like we were playing house. It's like we were living the life of a couple, but all we were really doing was having sex. And I can only speak from my experience. I don't necessarily know what the other person's experience was. But what I know was that when I really took a step back from these relationships and said, do I actually like these women for who they are? The answer was honestly not that much. And what I'm getting at here is that, like, if you had asked me if you could never have sex with her and you only could be her friend, so you were basing this completely on the conversation you have, the connection you feel, the fun you have when you're together, the type of person they are, their personality, their jokes, their humor, all of that. If you could never have sex with this person and you had to solely maintain a continuous relationship with them based on how much you like them as a human being, the reality is I probably would not have chosen to have a relationship with any of the long-term relationships I was in prior to my wife. That's just the simple truth. It doesn't mean I think they're bad people. It doesn't mean I judge them or like, these are beautiful human beings, wonderful, good-hearted people, like nothing negative to say about any of them. But I probably wouldn't have vibed with them if we weren't having sex. And here I am saying I'm in love with this person, calling her my girlfriend, saying, I love you. And meaning it. Like I wasn't lying. I wasn't fake. I wasn't just putting on an act for sex. I genuinely believed it at the time. Because that's how powerful Eros is. It makes us feel like we're in love with someone we don't even like. But it has a shelf life. It burns out over time. And in my experience, and I'm basing it on many relationships, and my body and hormones and things may be a little different from someone else's. So this isn't the rule for everybody, but this is my experience, is that carried me for about a year. After about a year, I started having serious questions about these relationships, which led to us ultimately breaking up. I experienced this pattern several times. And that led to us breaking up every time about 18 months in, ish, give or take a month or two. I had several relationships that followed this exact trajectory. There's attraction. Hey, I think you're hot. I'm drawn to you. Let's hang out. Let's spend some time together. We start having sex within the first or second time we hang out. We keep having sex with each other. A year later, we're in a pretty serious relationship. 18 months later, I'm ending it. Because for some reason I can't explain, I just don't love the person the way I did before. And I know I talk about this a lot, about framing sex in a certain context in a relationship and giving it some time before you jump into bed with someone. And I often talk about it because I think it can cause someone to lose respect, and it often does. But this is a cost that isn't talked about as much, and it should be talked about more. It's not even necessarily that they'll lose respect. It's that they'll think they like you more than they do. It's not that they're going to sleep with you and never call you again. It's that they are going to call you again. And they're going to want to see you again and again and again and again and again. And you find yourself a year later, 18 months later, in a relationship with someone you don't even like. And this doesn't just happen for men either. Because women actually release stronger bonding hormones during sex than men do. This is why men are more likely to drift after sex than women are. It's because women have an instinctual evolutionary drive to bond through sex, because sex with a woman means a potential child, which means she's potentially very vulnerable, which means being left alone at the moment she gets pregnant is very dangerous for a woman. So there's an instinctual evolutionary drive to bond through sex. And a lot of women, and I know this from women I work with, and I've seen it with other women in my life. A lot of women will be pursuing a man she doesn't even like, trying to force a relationship to work because she had sex with him. She thinks she likes him more than she does. And that doesn't only happen with women, that happens with men too. A lot of relationships that die after the year or 2 year period, This is the reason. It's because they had nothing more than eros. And when the eros faded, there was nothing left. So, as we look at moving toward anchored love, the eros first path is the quickest and the easiest. But it requires you to balance something very delicate. It requires you to balance your desire to get your hands all over that person and get their hands all over you with a sincere recognition of the phila developing between you, the friendship, the emotional connection, the likability factor. And this is what my wife said over and over and over again, even after we were sleeping together. She was like, I don't want to crash and burn. I've been through that before. I've had hot attractions that got real hot real fast and burned out just as quickly, and I'm not doing that anymore in my life. She said, I want a slow burn. I want to see what's real underneath all the sex. Like, I want to see what's actually real between us. And that was a level of wisdom and maturity that I had never experienced, but it made sense to me. And sometimes, because I know I talk about this topic of when is the right time to have sex with someone quite a bit, and someone will often ask me, like, well, how do you know when the right time is? Is it a certain amount of dates? And it's not any of that. Like, I often share, my wife and I had been talking for 3 weeks when we first slept together. And a lot of times when I speak on this topic, people think I'm saying you should wait for months or years, and I'm not necessarily saying that. But the right time is when you feel confident that there is more than just sex driving the relationship. So yeah, we did it 3 weeks in, but we spoke on the phone for an hour or more every single night for that entire 3 weeks. We developed a genuine relationship that had nothing to do with eros. It was us being friends, talking about common interests, making jokes, laughing together, sharing our stories. There was a genuine interest in the other person, not just in how we felt about the other person. And so the question is, do you actually like who this person is outside of the physical dimension? And do they actually like you? If you knew you were never going to have sex with that person, that it would never be romantic, are they someone you would still want to have a close relationship with? And that can be a very tough question to answer, because when eros is active, we idealize the person. You know, I recently had a session with someone where we were talking about this exact dynamic, and this person spent years kind of fawning over this person and loving them from a distance and developing a close friendship with them and imagining a romantic life with this person. And the moment that relationship got real, that person revealed themselves to be someone completely different than who they had idealized them to be. So the eros first path. You lead with that attraction. You lead with that natural chemistry, that natural pull towards somebody. but you pace it. You balance it. You make sure that there is a depth to the relationship that has more to it than just that. The Phila first path. This is an equally valid path, but it's less organic and it's more difficult. Because I know a lot of you probably have a friend in your life right now and you say, oh my God, if I could just be romantically attracted to them, that would be my soulmate. But I'm just not. And that's a real problem. And it's kind of a mystery. Like, there are definitely things we can point to explain that, but it's kind of a mystery. Like, why do we look at someone who theoretically would be the perfect person for us and have zero attraction to them? And I think sometimes there's just literal evolutionary elements that cannot be fought with. There's something in our biology that wires our attraction in a certain way, and we just can't fight that. And maybe sometimes the reason that person is your best friend is because you feel so safe with them in a way that you never feel safe with a romantic partner. That could be an element too. But there are people who do it. And you've heard the stories, right? Where someone will talk about their best friend that they had loved for years, and then one day they just saw them differently, and suddenly a whole new possibility opened up with that person that they had never seen before. Like, you've heard those stories, and it does happen sometimes. And I think it could happen more often. But it requires, honestly, a level of relational maturity that a lot of us just aren't there yet. So what do I mean by that? It's kind of like what I was talking about earlier with pragma, where I said the relationship matures in a way that just kind of roots out a lot of the egoic aspects of it. And when we're really stuck in that deep romantic love place, so much of that is driven by ego. And I think to let a friendship become more than a friendship, we have to let go of a lot of the idealization that makes it feel impossible. Because on a friendship level, you accept that person for who they are, and they accept you for who you are. You view that person as an equal. They aren't up on a pedestal. You aren't performing for them. You can be yourself around them. And that's ultimately where we end up when we're in pragma with someone. So a friendship is kind of already there without the romantic aspect. And for some reason, we tend to separate the two. The people that we would naturally be friends with are not the people we're romantically attracted to, and vice versa. What's driving a lot of that, I believe, is that we have this sense that we need to be chosen by someone who's better than us, someone that we have up on a pedestal. And that's why we can't really be that person's friend. Because when they come down from that pedestal and they're just human and they're just themselves with their quirks and their flaws and their things, it feels ordinary. And we don't want ordinary, we want extraordinary. And there's nothing wrong with wanting an extraordinary relationship. In fact, I think the most extraordinary relationships are those who are eventually in pragma together. There's nothing wrong with wanting an extraordinary relationship, but the part where it's a little sinister, is how we define extraordinary. Because what we're essentially saying is, I want to be someone special. And the way I'm going to become special is by finding a special person and becoming special to them. And now you look at your best friend, and they're not special, they're ordinary. Being chosen by them wouldn't validate anything in me. It wouldn't make me special. It wouldn't make me significant. And if we contrast this with what I was saying earlier about agape, like agape is the ultimate form of love. Agape is seeing everything as equal. Agape is seeing everything as equally lovable. So I'm not looking at my friend and saying, oh, well, they're ordinary, but this person over here is special. And I need to be chosen by a special person so I can be special myself. Do you see how that is a distortion of love, where love is unconditional, equal? It sees all things as equally worthy and equally lovable. But our egos operate on a very different plane from that. Our ego is always seeking significance. Our ego is always seeking to boost itself up. And this type of ego distortion is the very thing that makes deep, lasting, secure love with someone impossible. And that's why we're not attracted to our friends, because those relationships are too intimate. Those relationships are too vulnerable. They see me too clearly, too completely. And to be romantic with someone inside that context removes all the fantasy, all the idealization, all the projection. It just becomes two human beings standing completely naked together and loving what they see. And I honestly think that is the scariest place for us to go. You see, the fantasy, the idealization, that's actually a barrier to intimacy. It's a protection against intimacy. It protects us from being fully seen by another person. There's a certain level of maturity that can look at that best friend, that person who can make you feel completely safe, that person who knows all of you and loves you for who you are, and to say, this is enough for me. I don't need it to be a romantic fantasy. I don't need it to look a certain way. I don't need the external approval of what my friends or my family or my social environment are going to think of us. I don't need to be the perfect couple on the cover of the magazine. I can just let real love that exists between two human beings be enough. I can choose someone who's already choosing me. And it's rare for someone to do that. It's even rarer for two people to do it with each other, which is why it almost never happens. It requires two human beings at the same time to completely let down their ego structures and their ego defenses and let love just be enough. And somehow let that be so fulfilling that it actually turns you on. Most of us just really aren't there yet. And again, as I'm naming these two paths, I'm naming beginning with Eros and Philia developing alongside of it, or beginning with Philia and Eros developing later. I'm not saying that one is better than the other. I'm saying both need to be developed for a relationship to have a sufficient foundation. And that's why I'm using the term anchored love, to give that a name. It's the experience of being in a connection with someone where Eros and Philia are both present. You're turned on, you're sexually, romantically attracted to the person, and you also feel like they could be your best friend. You also let them really see you. You're not performing. You're not putting on a kind of pretense. You're not trying to prove anything. You just are who you are, and they are who they are. That's the foundation for what will ultimately become pragma as the relationship develops over time. But there's one other thing I want to name here as more of a spiritual or philosophical addition to this conversation. Because in my framework and my understanding of life, I believe that life is really about understanding agape. That maybe for whatever reason, there's something going on with us as human beings that doesn't really understand the love of God or the love of existence, if you don't like the word God. And this isn't a religious conversation. I'm not talking about Christianity or Islam or anything like that. This applies to everyone. But most religious or spiritual frameworks suggest that God is love. And that ultimate experience of love would be agape. I think we touch that sometimes in our purest moments, in our cleanest moments. We look at ourselves, we look at everything, all of existence, and we see how lovable and worthy it is. We touch into that at moments, but there's something about human beings that don't allow us to really live there. And when I say that pragma is the closest love that human beings have to agape, I think that our romantic relationships are a framework through which we can learn to understand what love truly is. That's why when we look at younger versions of ourselves, we look at being obsessed with someone, ruminating, the infatuation, the fantasy, the projection, the need, the desire, the wanting. When we look at all of that, there was something of love there, but it was distorted. The love couldn't really be pure. The love couldn't really be clean because it was tied up with my need to validate myself and my need to be special and my need to be chosen and my need to be good enough and my need to be accepted and belong and my need to get the approval of my friends and social circles. And it's like whatever love was there couldn't really express itself because there were all these distortions, and not just in me, but also in the other person. And so it's like two people trying to love each other through this complex web of all these convoluted aspects. And the love is there, but we just can't quite fully express it. And as we get older, we get more humble. And as we enter into a relationship with someone and we stay dedicated and committed to that relationship, even when it's not perfect, Even when you're tired, even when you're stressed, even when you're exhausted, even when they're not meeting your expectations. Even when you go through different seasons sexually, or even with all the different things that happen in a lifetime with someone. That humbles you. It softens the edges of your ego. It makes you more accepting. And that's closer to agape than anything else in the world. So our human relationships are like a classroom for love. And what's really interesting about this, because when my wife and I started dating, yes, there was eros there. There was philia there. Both of those were present, and both of those were quite well developed very early on in our relationship. And over the years, we've come up against a lot of walls. Who we were at the time is not who we are now. We've both changed. And we've both had to accept those changes. We've both had to choose love over and over and over again, even when the person that we're loving today isn't the person we decided to love 10 years ago. And a lot of our conditions have softened. A lot of our expectations have softened. We've become more understanding. We've become more accepting. We've chosen love when it was hard to choose love, not just when it was easy. And over time, that acceptance of each other has paralleled in our acceptance of ourselves. And this is the thing about true love, real love, agape love, is that I am included in it. You see, when I'm seeking specialness or I'm seeking validation in a relationship, there's something inherent in that says, I'm not enough right now, but if I'm chosen by this person, I will be. I'm not lovable right now, but if I'm chosen by this person, I will be. And that's where the intensity and the infatuation and the obsessiveness and all of it comes from. It's like my very identity is on the line. And that's an intense experience to have. But something you grow into over time with someone, them operating as your mirror, them operating as your reflection, is you grow into an acceptance of yourself. And it creates a recurring feedback loop. The more accepting the relationship is, the more you accept yourself, the more you accept yourself, the more accepting the relationship becomes. And it's this ongoing feedback loop that's teaching us what love actually is. The thing I want to leave you with as we close out today's episode is a question. What would it be like for you if you stopped looking at your romantic relationships as a way to validate your worth or make you significant or make you special or make you feel chosen? And you started viewing them as a context in which you could learn to be more loving. And so, if you go out on a date with someone and they ghost you, that's an opportunity to learn to be more loving. Can you for a moment step outside your personal experience of that situation and say that, whatever they did, I don't agree with it. It wasn't the right way to handle it, but I feel sorry for someone who doesn't have any more skills than that that they couldn't just be honest with me about how they feel. I feel sorry for what it's like to be that person who has to run from things in that way. Because extending compassion to them is a form of love. Could you look at yourself and say, their inability to be honest with me, their inability to acknowledge this connection doesn't make a statement about my inherent value. I'm lovable regardless. What if each of these experiences became an opportunity to practice love rather than an opportunity to get love? How might that shape your experience, and how might that shape how you participate with others? Because when you start to realize that anchored love is the only thing that's worth really looking for, and that the way to find that is to first be truly anchored within yourself, the entire landscape has new meaning. And you start to approach it from a completely different place. And on that note, I want to share something that I've been putting a lot of work into and I'm really excited about, and you'll be getting more details about in the near future. But it's called the Anchor Community. And it's going to be an ongoing monthly membership where we have the opportunity to connect on a regular basis. You get access to a personalized blueprint journey based on your relational blueprint. And it might be the most exciting thing that I've ever built. And I cannot wait to put it out in the world, and I cannot wait to share it with you. So it's not ready yet. And unfortunately today I don't have anything to offer around it, but I just want to let you know that I'm working on it behind the scenes. It's coming. I want you to be ready for it, because when it opens, I want those of you who are my core people who have been with me for a long time, who really understand these frameworks and follow this conversation, I want you to be in there with me. We're going to have a lot of fun together. It's going to be a really exciting place to be, and a really exciting place to dive deeper on everything we already talk about on this show. So thank you for listening. Thank you for being with me today. As always, lots of love and blessings to everyone. I will be back here next week. Take care until then. Bye. Is there something you'd like to sit down and talk to me about face to face? If so, here's how we can do that. Every week, I open my schedule for 1 or 2 private calls with potential clients. And if it's your first time meeting with me, I offer that session at a discounted rate of $250. Go to inspiredloveapproach.com/private coaching to book that session now, or just click the link in the show notes. And if you still don't know what your relational blueprint is, make sure to take the quiz and find out. You can find the link below as well. And after you take the quiz, I'll send you a personalized video breaking down your blueprint in detail. If you enjoy the Conscious Love Show, the best way you can support us is to follow or subscribe on whatever platform you're listening. It helps improve the ranking and get the work out to more people. Thanks for listening today, and I'll see you next time.